From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good morning and thank you for watching Texas This Week. Early voting in the primary runoff election starts a week from Monday. Texas Democrats will decide their candidate for lieutenant governor. Back in March, State Representative Vicki Goodwin from Austin fell just short of clinching her party's nomination. She ended the night with 48% of the vote in a three-way race. Now she'll face off against Houston area Union leader Marcos Vélez, who got 31% of the vote. This morning we are bringing you interviews with both candidates as they make their case to voters. We start with Vélez. In the primary, you came in second, but there was a sizable gap between you and State Representative Vicki Goodwin. First, your reaction to election night results.
Yeah, really excited. So when you look at the amount of time we both spent campaigning, State Rep Vicki Goodwin had a lot more name recognition, been campaigning about a year and a half longer than we had, and very humbled by the amount of votes we were able to pick up in that short 10 to 14 week period. So we were really excited.
What do you feel like is the biggest difference between the two of you?
I think it's a race between like an institutional politician, a very traditional career politician that people would look at, and a blue collar outsider that's fighting for working class people, trying to bring normal people back to government instead of like career politicians.
And do you feel like that message is resonating with voters?
I do. I think people are really tired of the status quo. They're tired of Democrats saying that they're against these conservative ideologies, but then always wanting to move to the middle, always wanting to build alliances, relationships. Look where that's gotten us as a party. And so I think people are responding to the idea of someone that's outside of government coming in and bringing the voice of the people.
But when you talk about building relationships, you surely would recognize that you're going to have to reach across party lines to get some things done.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between reaching across party lines and capitulating. And I think that when Democrats are in power, they're always trying to play the high game and be like, hey, we have to work with them. When Republicans are in power, they force their agenda. And I think Democrats are sick and tired of being stomped on.
Yeah. When you think about what Texans are dealing with right now, we go out and we talk to people. We've seen in poll after poll after poll, the issue that ranks number one consistently right now among Texas voters is affordability.
Yes.
What do you feel like can be done at the state level, if you are elected by the Senate, by the legislature, to really have an impact on affordability?
So I tell people all the time, that's one of the biggest differences between the two campaigns. My number one priority is raising the state minimum wage. And a lot of people would look at that and say, well, I don't make the state minimum wage. But there's a certain gap that your employer keeps between your wages and the state minimum wage. So a rising tide lifts all boats. If we raise wages at the bottom, wages for all Texans will follow. And that's the easiest way to address the soaring cost right now. I mean, a box of diapers is $30. A gallon of gas is $3 to $4. A case of beer, for good sakes, is $30. And so if you're making minimum wage right now, you have to work an entire day to fill up your tank and buy a case of diapers. And that's unsustainable.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, but you don't have a magic number, right, in terms of what you want to see the minimum wage raised to.
Well, I have a number, but it's tied to whatever a living wage is. And because inflation keeps going up, you don't want to tie yourself to a number and say, well, I think the minimum wage should be $20 an hour. And if you lock yourself in at $20 and inflation keeps on the track it is, that no longer is a living wage. And so I've always been very clear. Whatever the data shows a living wage is at the time that we move the legislation is what I support. But I think it does have to be a living wage. You should be able to afford a roof over your head, food to eat, health coverage on, the state minimum wage.
And so when you're thinking about for, right now, 2026, 2027, what's that number?
Probably about $24 an hour.
I mean, what do small business owners say when they hear that number? That's a big number for them.
So, but here's the reality. If we actually had incentives for small business owners instead of carrying over these massive surpluses, we have to be fiscally responsible, but we should have programs to help small business owners meet that gap. It's not about leaving small business owners behind. They're an extension of workers, because when you're a small business owner, you wear every single hat. So it's not about leaving them behind. It's about setting up the systems in place to make sure that they're not left behind.
You talk about raising the minimum wage as a top priority. Tell me about some of the other big priorities you have with this campaign.
Yeah, so look, we took $1 billion out of public education. Funding schools is a big deal for me, but when you look at funding schools, it goes beyond just making sure they have the money they need to operate. We have to pay teacher salaries. We have to make sure we fund teacher pensions. We have to make sure that we give teachers the right to collectively bargain so they can establish a minimum floor for themselves. Beyond that, when you look, we have one of the highest rates of uninsured people in America, if not the highest, and so we have to make sure that we address the healthcare crisis, one of the highest rates of maternal mortality, Rural hospitals are shutting down. You know, for people that live within Austin city limits, they may not see the hospital closures, but you go talk to some of these people a little bit further out, drive, 2.5, 3 hours west, people are feeling these issues. And so I think when we start looking at big priorities, we have to raise the state minimum wage. We have to make sure that we fund our public schools. We have to make sure that we address the healthcare issue in this state. And then when you look at the housing crisis, living in your own home, being able to move out of your parents' house should not be something only reserved for the top 1% of 30 and 40-year-olds. All adults should be able to afford their own place. And so, that's another thing that we have to address.
Final thoughts for our viewers on why they should elect you this May 26th?
Sure. Hey, look, representation matters. When you look across the state of Texas, for every single governor, we've had close to 50 governors, over 43 different lieutenant governors, 1,000 state senators. Not a single one of them has been a person of color. And when you start looking at representation within the ticket, we have a very it's a very Austin ticket right now, and that's not necessarily a problem. But when you look at, you can't win a statewide ticket with just Austin candidates and just Austin votes. I think we need diversity, and I bring that diversity to the ticket.
You fared very well in March, but fell short of getting the percentage of votes that you needed to avoid this runoff. What do you want voters to know about you versus your opponent in this race?
I mean, really the big difference between the two of us is experience. I've been in the legislature for 8 years now. I've passed legislation, which isn't easy. I understand the process. I know the people. And for the lieutenant governor to step into that office and be effective on day one needs that experience. So the experience that I have will help me be effective as lieutenant governor.
You know, he likes to say that experience just would lead to more of the same, right? Just career politicians who already know, sort of know the ins and outs and aren't necessarily looking out for the people's best interests. What do you say to that?
Well, for so many years, we as Democrats haven't been able to get the big things done. We've wanted to increase school funding, but we're stopped by the Republicans. We've wanted to expand Medicaid, but we've been stopped by the Republicans. We've wanted to change our election laws to make it easier for people to vote. We've been stopped by Republicans. When we have the power of the lieutenant governor seat, it will change. We can set the priorities, and that will make all the difference. And we share the same priorities. We've been on the campaign trail together, and the things that we talk about, essentially we want the same thing. And so for him to say that because I've been in the legislature before means it'll be status quo, of course it won't.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that I thought was interesting is he pointed to what he likes to call an Austin ticket, right? With State Representative Gina Hinojosa, the nominee for governor, you also representing Austin, that you guys don't have the statewide standing, folks outside of Austin aren't as familiar with you. What do you say to that?
I mean, I don't know why it matters where we're from. I've been all over the state. I've met with people through my committee work, through passing legislation, and have heard from people all over the state. And essentially the 4 things that I'm running on are important to people all over Texas. And that is supporting our public schools, making sure we fix our broken healthcare system, addressing affordability, particularly housing affordability, and water. Water is such a huge issue right now. And so the fact that I'm from Austin doesn't mean that I'm ignoring places, other cities in the state.
You know, that platform that you mentioned, I want to dive into a few of those points. Let's start with public education. You have been in the legislature for 8 years, so you already know how much of a chunk schools take out of the budget. Obviously, we've got the property tax issue. You've now got the Texas Education Freedom Account program combined with all of that. How can you really put more money towards public schools? Where's that money going to come from?
Well, in the last session, we left $4 billion on the table. So according to our rules, we can't spend more than our revenue coming in, but we underspent that by $4 billion. So there's some money there. There's also the $1 billion going to the private school program. That's $1 billion that we could bring back into our public schools. There are other programs that we have that we might be able to move some funds around, but the bottom line is that we have underfunded our public schools since 2019. With inflation, this session, we added $8.5 billion, but it would have taken $18 billion to catch up. And unfortunately, we could be getting to a point where our economy does slow down. And so it may take some very careful shuffling and looking at budget priorities and making sure that we're putting the money where it needs to be. And I think public education is it, because that's what gives people an opportunity and really creates a successful economy.
Okay, so let's talk about something you said there, that $1 billion for the Education Savings Account program. You would want to undo the program, dismantle the program?
I would, because, and you know, again, we're underfunding our public schools that serve 95% of our students. If that were different, then perhaps what we need to do is really make sure that we are addressing the needs of all students, particularly our special ed students. And the voucher program selects the students. It's not that they get to choose, it's the schools that get to choose the students. And so we will see that students are left behind, falling through cracks, and it's just not a fair system.
Is it fair to the families who have gotten into the program to say, okay, well, you got that for one school year. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed that public, that private school that you were a part of that perhaps you love. We're no longer going to pay for this anymore.
Well, I would encourage those private schools where the students have gotten enrolled to come up with some scholarship programs to help those students that are doing well in their programs.
Give our viewers some final thoughts about why they should elect you on May 26th.
Again, it's the experience, it's the fact that I have been around the state for all 8 years that I've been in the legislature to make sure I understand these really complicated issues. And I do want to serve the people of Texas. I want to make sure our working families are doing well and not struggling like they are right now.
Registered voters have until May 15th to request a mail-in ballot. Early voting runs May 18th through the 22nd. Election Day is May 26th. That's Texas This Week.